Okay. Good evening. Welcome to the Maison Française. Welcome, everyone. Tonight, we're thrilled to have Mame-Fatou Niang presenting her work, one of her lines of work right now. Mame-Fatou Niang is an associate professor of French and Francophone studies in the Department of Modern Languages at Carnegie Mellon University. And maybe most importantly for us right now, she is a visiting professor in the Department of French at Columbia. She's teaching a class on Alice Diop, French cinema and post-colonial universalism, which is really the basis, or which is connected to her forthcoming book, Alice Diop, French Cinema and the Double Vague, to be published in 2025. What? November 2025. Mam's work defies categorization, or at least it defies easy categorization. She's worked on Blackness in contemporary France, on Black and African diaspora in a very global perspective, and in the context of urban planning and issues on reparation and decommemoration. She has, she's known, or she was first known, I think, in the Francophone world with her movie, the movie she co-produced and co-directed called Maria Noire in 2016. So she's been very active in documentary making. She's also produced and co-directed a movie on a documentary short movie on reparations called Réparer, and to be released in 2024. Or later this year, and she's also, beyond her involvement in movies and that kind of media, she's done work that I would say is connected to philosophical, political reflections, with a short book on universalism that was published in 2023, which I have in my bag because I wanted her to sign it, but maybe you can get it, you can get into my bag, so that I can show it around, sorry. Sorry, I don't have it in my bag. But it was published, yes, so it's called Universalism, and it was published by which press again? Anna Moza, yeah, so a press that has been very important in the past few years in France in publishing kind of short reflections, philosophical reflections around key concepts. And Mam's book was really central in that collection. She's also, obviously, she's also a kind of movie critic, movie theorist with the work on Alice Diop, and also she's worked on issues of cultural artifacts in context of cities and urban landscapes, and that's really the basis for her talk tonight, called Sounds as Archives and Monuments. And we could not be happier to have Mam tonight, to have her this semester at Columbia, and to have her tonight at the Maison Française. Thank you so much.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Thank you for attending. I'm really happy to be here, see some of my students, old friends, new friends, and share with you. This is going to be kind of informal, the art book from an ongoing residency called Echoic Sounds of Silence that I started a year ago at Atelier Médicis. So I wanted to use first this occasion to. How am I going to do this? Okay, this needs to come here. Do you have a... Is this working? I'm going to need to be... Oh, yay. Of course not. Can you hear me? Yes. So I wanted to use this occasion to congratulate my dear sister Mati Diop, who will visit our class this semester, winner of the Berlinale Golden Bear for Dahomey, a 2024 documentary on the return of 26 looted artifacts from Benin to France. This is what she said in her acceptance speech. The first time I imagined what restitution might look like in reality, I first heard a sound, a frequency, something trembling like an earthquake. It was the sound of a wall collapsing, a wall of silence, a wall of denial that each and every one can and must together tear down. To rebuild, we must first restitute. And what does restitution mean? To do justice. She then quoted Aimé Césaire, this line from Aimé Césaire's Discours against colonialism, a powerful text written in 1950. For us, the choice is made. We are among those who refuse to forget. We are those who refuse to accept amnesia as a method. This work, this talk, and the talk before, and the book before, is dedicated to my maternal grandmother, Aminata J. She did not know how to read and write, but she rocked her world and ours. Born in Roanne, in the Department of Loire, in 1925, she belonged to the fifth generation of women who ensured that our family in the Haut-Beaujolais would keep a vibrant sense of Saint-Louis du Sénégal, our home before metropolitan France. She raised me, and I owe her my earliest understanding of my situation growing up in France as a seventh generation citizen, hounded by a question that followed me like a second skin. D'où viens-tu? Where are you from? I also owe her a deep understanding of artistic practices as undeniably tied to practices of the everyday and the experience of life itself. My grandmother could not imagine that one needed an atelier, brushes, and formal education at the famous cours or école to be an artist, as the world and everyday life served both as her atelier and her canvas. She taught me Wolof, a language that I spoke before I spoke French. She also told me that the history of my family, though seemingly chaotic from the outside, a history of displacement, poverty, death, and erasure, was also a narrative of birth, life, constant adaptation to changes, a narrative of communication and flows between humans and non-humans, a text that resonated with others in multiple universes, a canvas whose vastness went way beyond the borders of the République and those of the French nation state. I also dedicate this talk, like the one before and the one before, to Tyler Stovall, my mentor, who transitioned 1,012 moons ago, 2 days after my grandmother. In the Lebus tradition, last Sunday marked the day Tyler fully became an ancestor. Tyler often called himself an agent du chaos, which was a play on words on the French pronunciation of knockout and chaos, and which also sounded weird, given Tyler Stovall's extremely calm demeanor, his soft speech, lanky figure, and the sweet, sweet smile that greeted you before any words came out of his mouth. But bringing chaos into order and making order out of chaos was something that permeated Tyler Stovall's work both as a scholar, a renowned historian of race in France. The bulk of his work and something that he tirelessly transmitted around him was the refusal to accept the paralyzing gaze of necropolitics building and solidifying around us, and affirm the need to constantly reevaluate both the tools, value, and actors of restitution, repair, and reparation. I've spoken a lot about how instrumental Tyler Stovall was in my decision to attend my school's study abroad program in 2005, and from someone coming from a poor working class family at the time, everything about the decision was crazy. From the fee that the American embassy, the travel to Paris. I was coming from Lyon, the fee, the visa, and this is something the first chapter of my book, Reformulation of Blackness, is called An Unknown Name in the Syllabus. And I tell this story, and many friends told me, don't do that, you'll be burning bridges. And I say, there's no bridges to burn, only bridges to repair and build. So we were told by the university and the schools study abroad program, that American universities were not very fond of black and brown students, and that our application had very few chance to make it. We didn't listen, and this is how I landed at Brown University in 2006. And that 9 months program changed my life, because I arrived as a English and architecture major, and after 2 years in class prépa, Ibo Can, I was the schoolgirl who regularly scored first prize in history. I went to Concours Général in French, and it's at Brown University for the first time that I heard the name Fanon. It's at Brown University that I learned that Haiti was a French colony. It's at Brown University that for the first time I heard the name Marie Scondé. And that that year, that 9 months ended up being almost 20 years now. So, in the world of tradition, those who are no longer with us in the flesh are still with us. As Senegalese poet Birago Diop wrote in his poem Souffle, les morts ne sont pas morts. Ils sont dans l'ombre qui s'éclaire et dans l'ombre qui s'épaissit. Les morts ne sont pas sous la terre. Ils sont dans l'arbre qui frémit. Ils sont dans les bois qui gémit. Ils sont dans l'eau qui coule. Ils sont dans la case. Ils sont dans la foule. Les morts ne sont pas morts. So, going with this idea of how to keep things alive, how do we memorialize? What does it mean to be us, right? And when I say us, it's the group of 6 people that accompanied me in this residency. 6 women, all residents of Clichy-sous-Bois, Clichy-Montfermeil. And Clichy is famous for 2 things. It's where Victor Hugo said Les Misérables, but it's almost also more famous for being the place where the 2005 riots started following the death of Zied and Bouna. 5 years ago, when it was announced that France will host the Olympics, there's not a lot of land available around, and Clichy was among the places that were chosen to receive, installations, but also what will be the Village Olympique. And the idea was that that will benefit the residents who first have to be displaced, right? And we know the story. Seoul, Barcelona, Atlanta, London, that doesn't happen. And residents knew that they had to, they would not come back. And some of these people were born there. One of the women working with us was in her 80s. She was born in the neighborhood. So far, here are the products that were born out of the residency. And the idea around the residency was, how do we remember a place? How do people know a place? And when you talk of something like the banlieue, something like Clichy-sous-Bois, what are the ideas that come to mind when you think of the banlieue? And because I'm interested in sound, what are the sound that people think of when they think of the banlieue? What are the sound that people think of, the people that the resident think of when they think of the place where they live? How can we map out, cartographier this space using the sounds of the everyday from the resident, and not the sounds that are projected when we think of these spaces? How can these sounds and the maps and objects, or mental maps or sensible maps that we have when we collect this sound, become monuments? Right? Because when we think, we're right in the middle of these very heated debate in France on what are the place of monument, how do we represent, and oftentimes these debates revolve around statues. And this is something that I kind of knew from talking to my grandmother, parents, and that was even more solidified. You'll see in the conversation, some of the conversation that I translated in the book. For many of these women, memorialization doesn't necessarily mean having a statue. Memorialization can also be the landscape. So how do we? I'll come back a little bit to that. So the goal of Echoic was to bring audience to consider different perspectives of the banlieue by hearing and listening differently. The banlieues, so I don't say suburbs because especially in the US, when I say suburbs, people think, white picket fence, 1.5 kid. Is it 1.5 or 2 kids and a dog? So the projects around France's big city, and they are as much a product of urban planning as they are a product of also decades of representation, mental representation, from cinema, literature, etc. I mean, we have one of the top experts in the field, Dr. Jean Beeman, here. If you want to know about banlieue, this is the person to talk to. And the idea was to then work with 6 residents. I present really quickly the product. We had 4 works of art that were, these are 2 meters by 1 meter. We did everything from scratch, weaving, and everything is made with materials that that we recuperated in the sites of that were going to be destroyed. The cotton, the Atelier Médicis is sitting next to a factory that used to produce wool. So we recuperated some wool there. We were able to get some wool shipped from Senegal, Mali, and in villages close to where one of the participants of the resident was from or where her family originated, and we created our own method. This is in the film, pour carder, mixing the two thread and have one thread that would be a mix of what used to be produced in Clichy-sous-Bois in the 19th century in those filatures, and wool that came from Bamako and Bakel. So these are examples of 4 pieces that were created by the ladies with me. This one is En cours, and the book and a film, Asa, that will be released later. The residency also produced 2 byproducts because I said, what I wanted to do was to look at the ordinary, right? When we think of the banlieue, the first thing that comes to mind is les bruits et la fureur, right? The banlieue in movie, it's, screeching tires, it's riots, it's rowdy kids, rowdy, like Céline Sciamma said, the rowdy voice of these wild black girls in the subway, fire. I mean, these are not pleasant noises. And I wanted to, come back to the everyday. What are the noise of the everyday that we don't hear from in the general representation? And then, as I will present in the course of this collection, I mean, we collected more than 400 sounds that we were either able to récolter, if the sound was still available or if the place had disappeared, that we had to recreate with the help of some of my students at Carnegie Mellon. And in the course of that work on sound and the ordinary, something happened, something that was completely unexpected, which was the importance that water was going to have as an element, central element of definition, of situation, of remembering, and remembering as in reattaching. And for all of the residents, the 6 women working with me. And that, so immediately in the heels of working in the summer, I was approached by the Terror Foundation of American Art, for American Art, and I had this absolutely team of incredible Avengers. I call them my Avengers, scholars, literary critique, artists, architects, from all corners of the Black Atlantic, Curacao, Brazil, South Africa, the Netherlands, and we have Belie, who attended the residency. So we're able to spend an incredible week in Giverny thinking on, what water, what water does to blackness, right? At what point Africanness becomes blackness thanks to this contact with water. I'll come back to that. And the byproduct or the second or third product that I'm the most happy, incredibly, yes, happy with is Les Voix de nos Mamas. So sisters Mame-Fatou, Asa and Asetu, who participated in the residency with me, who lived in Clichy-Montfermeil, who were born in Clichy-Montfermeil, who were part of the residency, and who had this incredible project. They've been recording their mother, their families from Mali, and they've been recording their mother. And I remember the first time I told them about the residency, they told me, I mean, c'est tellement banal. Nobody, and I was like, that's one, that's what I'm looking for, something that's banal. And two, I've never heard your mom's voice on TV. I do not hear your mom's voice. I want to have that. So they created two pieces with me, and their pieces are the beginning of their own residency at the Atelier Médicis that they just started 10 days ago. And we toured, we went to Pittsburgh last year. They will be in New York later this year, and they're just absolutely, absolutely incredible. So, so when we think really quickly of the banlieue, of course, read my book. No, I'm kidding. And read Jean's book. Images of the banlieue. And in my first book, I talked about three moments that was very important in the way these places became objects of public engagement. 1979, 1980, the riots in the Trois-V, Vaux-en-Velin, Vénissieux, Villeurbanne. 2005, following the fall riots, and 2015, following both the Charlie Hebdo attack and the Bataclan later in the same year. And something that's very interesting, I remember, when I was a grad student reading all the people who were really hot at the time, Hargreaves, right? And for example, for them, the racialization of the banlieue started in 1980. And doing, I realized that actually it was not really like quite the case, because, for example, the first riots in the 80s started in the Bassin Lyonnais. And the explanation, I mean, the banlieues are not seen as it's not a phenomenon. Yes, French people do discover that the whole issue with ghetto, which so far had been something that, we thought only affected the United States or UK, we have a problem. I mean, we have these, footage archives of Antenne 2 where people discover that, oh my God, we might have a problem with this banlieue. But overwhelmingly, the explanation is that this is something very local, limited to the Bassin Lyonnais, and it has an explanation, which is, the issues affecting the factories on the Bassin du Rhône. And so you see the words that are used, people are still, for example, when a journalist get into one of the banlieue and try to interview people, we're still using words to talk about people. Youth, resident, delinquent, okay, policeman, immigré, ouvrier, pauvre, classe moyenne, français, étranger. And the theme that I use, you see, I mean, it's really, the explanation is, something social, désœuvrement, unemployment. The shift really is in 2005, where we go from the banlieue being a local problem to now we have a national problem. And the national problem is, I mean, especially exacerbated when we realize that the riots that starts in Clichy-sous-Bois, and I'll show you the map later, will contaminate, right, the whole country. And something that is also very interesting that I noticed after 2005 is the vocabulary that is being used. The vocabulary is increasingly militaristic, but also increasingly medical, almost, so it's riots, malaise, violence, fever, trouble, rage, contagion, eruption, tension, revolt. And 8 out of 10, I think, are words that, there's some kind of trouble, some kind of disease. And the words also that are used to talk about people are changing. So it's less neutral, and there's something, use. I think youth will be, the number one. Racaille, immigrant, Africain, Arab, musulman. So the ethnic, imprint of the banlieue is getting more, stronger and stronger. And in 2015, are we in 2015? No, I'm sorry. 2015, the banlieue, it's no more, local or national. We're really into something that is global and that is, attached to this global threat of Islam following the atrocious terrorist attack of 2015. So these are, oh, maybe je vais peut-être y arriver. So, some images of Clichy-sous-Bois. When we hear Clichy-sous-Bois, this is what we think of. So, my work with sound, and this study between sound and space, sound and race, and how we use sound to make sense of spaces started 10 years ago when I wrote analyzed this movie. I don't know if everybody knows this movie, Girlhood. Um, and I think we've discussed this when you invited me to screen Marianne Noir. When Girlhood came, Bande de Filles, it was the first film with the almost or all black cast and made by a director that I absolutely adore. I still adore her. I just saw her like a month ago. Absolutely adore. And I remember when the trailer came in June of 2014, we were so excited. I had my student watch the trailer, and I planned my course in the fall to follow the release of the movie, representation of girlhood, the intersection between girlhood and race in French popular art. The movie came out in October, and I remember I was in my office grading. It was our Wakanda. My family, I mean, people went in groups of 14, 15 to see it. It's just how, uh, you know, awaited, how excited people were. And I had a phone call from my sisters and my cousin, and that's why I made Marianne Noir. I was in the middle of, writing my tenure dossier, and at the time the university was like, a book. So I didn't have time for film, but I squeezed the film because to hear my cousins, 14 and 15 at the time, come out with that disappointment, I said it has to stop. So I wrote enough on why the movie was complicated, but one small thing, for example, which actually is not small, is the sound treatment of the banlieue. In Cannes, the director said, I mean, she said this multiple times, that she didn't do research, she didn't know this space, but she didn't feel like she had to do research on either the banlieue, on these black bodies, because she's treating them as white pages that can be filled with her artistic practice. Which I do agree. I'm an artist, but the black body in the West is not a blank page. It's a site that is loaded with stereotypes, and the movie, I mean, there's been a very interesting 30-page spread in the New Yorker 2 years ago where I dialogued with her, where 10 years later she realized that the movie really, surfed on these stereotypes, and that if it's the case in 2024, then it might have been the case in 2014. It's one thing, but one of them is sound. Sound. Um, the movie suppose, I mean, she's the age my sister was at the time, and nothing about the sound treatment of the space is me or where I live. The music. The only way I can really help you understand this is if you're told that you're going to watch an Italian movie, something that happened in the 14th century, and there's Indian music the whole time, right? And you're like, so is it an artistic experiment? No, this is what it is. No, yes, it is, right? So it's completely alienating, and just not the music. Um, there's this very famous scene that everybody talks about, the with Diamond. It's a beautiful blue scene with Rihanna. The entire um, sound treatment is synth, synthetic, Parawan. There's no beat. There is no beat. The sound of the everyday, the way, the music, right? What kind of music will Mariam be listening when she's in the subway? No. The music that her mom is listening, or what's happening when her mom is washing her hands. So there's an entire cartography of life that follows sounds, noises, music that is missing, and that is further alienating these spaces from the audience and the public who watched the movie and loved it, but then didn't recognize any. I mean, for example, I mean, I recreated what the score could have been using both my sisters, and her friends. I called it le bruit d'un jour. I asked them to walk around with tape and tape we recorded 24. Why do 15 years old, can be active for 24 hours? They were really active for 22 hours, right? So we recreated what with students at Carnegie Mellon. It was a semester. This is the noise, the encounters, but also the music that you hear when you enter in houses. And we realized that for the parents, we were able to measure that 22% of the music that you hear in a household of Malian origin is French, like old French music. I don't know what's wrong, what's going on with Malian mothers and Georges Brassens and Aznavour. What? 30%? And I was like, are you sure we need to redo this? So yeah. And so just to present the project, so this is the Atelier Médicis, and this was one of the last towers to be destroyed, La Forestière, where Asa and her family lived. My machine à tisser. Oh, okay. And this is a collection of sound that we were able to. Oh God, I'm sorry. Ooh, okay, so this one is kind of expected. These are very short samples, like 8. So these are very short samples of the sounds that we récolté, and I will tell you what we did with it. So we I worked with 6 residents. We worked full time during the summer, and something happened the first week. 2 kids, 9, 10, came and asked us if they could stay with us. We said yes. And before we knew it, they were drawing. Then they went down, called friends, and the second day we had, and at one point we had 38 people in the workshop, in the space with us. It's summer, many people don't go away, and I didn't want to turn down people, turn them away, but we had some serious work to do. So I ended up working 2 full time, having residents. It was kind of a first come first serve, on a walking basis. People could come, and we ended up having a very pretty solid group, like 10ish people who would stay with us the whole time. And in the afternoon, I would have one-on-ones with each of the ladies, and there were one man in the residency. The idea was that each of them, we would spend the first 2 weeks just talking about what life was, like what life is in the neighborhood, what their memories are, if they've already moved. So out of the 6 that I work with, 4 were able, their families were able to be were relocated in the neighborhood, but I knew that, I mean, it was a temporary relocation. They would have to move before the end of 2024, and 2 were relocated outside of Ile-de-France. One went to Nantes and another one went to Marseille, but they came to spend the summer with friends because they missed the neighborhood and did the residency with us. So the idea was to spend 2 weeks just on one to think about, what are the memories. And it was very interesting because we realized that for many people, memories, I mean, it's very easy to talk about it. It's very easy to imagine. When you ask someone, an image, they can come up with an image, they can come up with a word. But an oral memory, people had to think hard, right? What is a sound that reminds you of this neighborhood? What is the sound that for you represents this neighborhood? What is the sound of your childhood, right? And but once that, kind of like le robinet was the tap was opened, the flow of memory just came, and we had a hard time actually. Many of them had a hard time pinpointing to one story, because out of this one memory sound, we wrote a story, and that story would have two supports. First of all, if the sound, for example, Asa had for her, the neighborhood was the sound of her mother's bangles. Her It's a family of 5 girls, and the mom would not let them play outside. But every other Sunday, she belonged to like a woman's circles, a tontine, and before going there, she would, oil her hair, comb her hair, and the noise of the bangle while she's combing her hair to the kids was the sign that freedom is coming. We can roam the neighborhood and go have ice cream. So we wrote that story. We went to the archives, and the second funny thing was that le camion de glace. Monsieur Léon was a very interesting. I wish he was still alive, but from the the description that I had from the residents, who now are young adults, he had one eye, just like his idol, Jean-Marie Le Pen. So we wondered if he was wearing it, to be like Jean-Marie Le Pen. And he's selling ice cream in this neighborhood with a majority of black and brown people, with pictures of Jean-Marie Le Pen plastered next to the menu of ice creams. And the funny thing, because it's a poor neighborhood where, families, you have sometimes families with 11, 12 kids. Parents can't afford a cone for each kid. He was very, 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 I'll show you this later. I thought it was also very interesting because as racist as he was selling sangoumé. I don't know if you know what sangoumés are. Sangoumé are ice threads that you put in a little bag, plastic bag. It can be hibiscus juice or mango juice or baobab juice. Then you lock it, and it's like 1 cent. I'm sure you can find this in Harlem. Go and ask for sangoumé in Harlem. It's 1 cent. So he was selling regular ice cream and sangoumé, which I think again was interesting for someone who was a diehard Le Pen fan. That he was selling. I mean, sangoumé are, quintessential West African threats. So we went to the archives at La Mairie and found le tracé of the ice cream, and weaved together the base of her piece, to recreate the lines of the ice cream truck going through the neighborhood, and entered, I don't have another word, both her mom's bangles and the sound of the ice cream truck that we were able to recreate. And this is the funny thing. We listened to dozens of ice cream truck songs, and everybody said, I remember it was a very, very particular sound, and it's not this, no, this is American, this is from Sweden. And we decided to cook it. So people will try to, because it was so particular, people will try to remember it. And we had an entire neighborhood, people who remembered, chasing the kids around the ice cream truck, telling us, pointing at what they, the notes, and we were able to recreate the sound. And how I knew that it works, because we will have, people in their 40s, 50s listen to it, and they'll be like, so what it is? That's a, yeah. And ice cream truck, oh my God, c'est le camion de Monsieur Léon. And I was like, yes, we have this. So, and when we presented the piece at Pompidou, one of my students at Carnegie Mellon had created an app that allowed visitors to play the sound by playing the phone, scanning the work. I'll show you how it works. So it was definitely a community work. Sometimes it was hard, to make barriers or to put limits and at first people were very shy, didn't want to share their stories, and then before you know it, everybody wanted to be part of the six, and people would come tell me why you didn't choose me. So that was hard, but we made it it was fun. um, we presented at the United Nations. One of my favorite, okay, so I think my favorite part of the residency is Asa and her sisters doing their own residency. And the other favorite part is I think that they're dating now. So these are two neighbors, Monique and Monsieur Abbasi, who met who met at the workshops that we were giving and spent 3 months with us. They spent the entire summer with us, and it was very funny because I realized that their language of love was to bark at each other. So he's like, "What are you drawing? A heart for who? For you." So the language of love was to bark at each other, not be nice at each other. And then towards the middle of the residency, I start seeing them at the neighborhood cafe where she would oftentimes be the only woman, but she didn't care. And yeah, this is another nice story. Um, and I have interviews of her. She's one of the oldest residents. She's been displaced. And one of the things that was very, very important for her was this idea of normalcy. Can, you know, quotidian, banal, normalcy be associated to the space where we live with Clichy sous Bois? So in June, we presented three of the works at the Centre Pompidou, and this was it was great, not because it's the Centre Pompidou, but because we don't often think we don't often see these bodies as, and when I say these bodies, I mean French, black, from the banlieue, right? I live behind, not too far from the Centre Pompidou. In the exhibits, I mean, you'll see loads of artists from Africa, the Caribbean, English Caribbean, Dutch Caribbeans, the United States. But one thing, and I talk about it in the book that I that was very heartwarming was that most of the black people at the Centre Pompidou are, what do they do? What's their occupation? Huh? Security and cleaners. And it was absolutely incredible when once people realized that the artists who were exhibiting were people who looked like their sisters, their mothers, their mothers. And one of the women, Tata Harijana, who was with us, Clichy-sous-Bois is 45-minute driving, 25 minutes when things are good, 45 minutes when things are bad, 3 hours by train. The connection is just insane. It's 2.5 hours to 3 hours. It's incredible. And but she's never been to the Centre Pompidou. So it was also, another reflection that we had on the way these bodies occupy these type of spaces, and even how we were stopped at first by security. Like, this is l'entrée des artistes. We are the artistes. So the book, um, again, every time you have this, it means that you can play the little app that you will use to talk to, explore the work of art. Will also work with these little spirals that are neoblasts. Neoblasts are the molecule that help your body heal when you get hurt. It's all about reparation, and to have a host of archives, because this idea of, I don't use archives, I say nest, right? These are little nests that help you go beyond the page, go beyond what we were able, what I curated, because each one of these stories, I mean, there's so much more. And again, what was curated, what was chosen. And to me, it was very important to leave also much more behind that people could, feel free to explore. And next semester, my students, with the entire archive that we built, the drawings, sound, are creating a website that will be connected to the book. These are Sangomes. So midway, the residency was cut in two. I had to leave for 3 weeks. 3 weeks after Nael was murdered, and I roamed France. We raised more than 100,000 euros to help children, mostly children, teenagers, a majority of first-time offenders, a majority of people without who have never had issues with law. And I mean, Marwan Mohamed, in his research, he this is a phenomenon that is well known. Usually in riots, the less experienced get caught by police, right? And it was absolutely incredible that as a result to the death of these kids, other kids, 15, 16, 17, who had never had to do anything with law, were spending 6 months in jail for a one earrings. And for 3 weeks, I left Paris. We raised the money. We had friends, lawyers helping us as much as possible. But that when I say that his death cut the residency, my breath, any you know s- desire or capacity to think humanity, the country into it is it's really what happened. I had a really hard time, and it his death also marked a very strange turn in the residency, but a turn for I don't know. Um, he Nael was his car, once he was shot, his car crashed, and I think this was very, very tragically ironic. He crashed on a street called Nelson Mandela. He literally died there, and he died right where the bidonville of La Folie stood, literally. So his death was a interesting mise en abîme of ways we forget, because I looked at hours and hours and hours of media coverage, and that was never mentioned, right? So how can we forget something like that, that one of the biggest slums in France stood right where this kid died. And so I came back to Paris. I want to say broken, but it was complicated, wondering why we're doing what we're doing. And I was not alone. I was not alone. So the first time after 3 weeks, when I came back, Tatari Jana, who I weave, and she taught us how to dye, and dyeing is an art. So the first workshop that we did was to chasser les bleus. She said that, chasing the blues away. So we sat. She put the batik out. We put the batik. So the six of us, each one had we call it a plaque, with the same amount of batik, this blue, weaved our thread, and we started singing. We just had to. She just told us you had to shout, you had to say, you have to, bring what's in your heart. Our hearts were very heavy, and while and shouting to the water. and something with the vibration of the voice, because you put the water and you put the powder of indigo at the center of the water, and something in, you know, the way you move water with, you know, the way, the vibration of your body while you are screaming or crying, makes the indigo undulates in ways where we started with the same amount of water, we started with the same amount of powder, but each of us had a different coloring because of how the, you know, the undulation of our voices, you know, holding the undulation of our body, disseminated the powder. So this was the only piece that we all created together, and the door was made with and I will talk about that later. The door, the piece of wood that it's on is made with a door that we collected at one of the. So we did a lot of illegal things. We had to go in this place. I have 10 more minutes. These were, you know, places that you could not. We should have not been in many of these places. So everything here were either made by us or recuperated. Dylan. So, oh, I'm going to read because otherwise this is. So the residency took an unexpected turn after I had two friends visit, and the motif of water started being. I mean, and I realized. I mean, when I didn't tape our conversation because taping changed the dynamics of, and for many of these women, even for those who were born in France, I mean, 4 of the 6 women that I work with were born in France. 3 of them had parents born in France. So these are French people, right? But the relationship with being taped is something that, you know, it's school, administration, or police. So there's really something, a very particular relation with being taped and having your voice, you know. So I would just force myself to remember as much as possible the content of our conversation and never tape them, except, you know, towards the end. But when I remember, you know, go back to my notes. I have 5 notebooks full of notes. Water had been there since the beginning, but I was not paying attention because that wasn't what I was looking for. But water had been there as a threat from the beginning, and the threat really appearing after Alexis Peskin, and Marvila Arroyo's visit. So I will just share really quickly. We have 10 more minutes. So it's poems, it's thoughts, but it's also conversation that we had. Let me share this one with you. This is funny. So this is after a conversation that we all had. So Abya Yala is a term derived from the Guna language of the Kuna people, indigenous to Panama and Colombia, translating to land of life, land of blood, fertile land. It is also the name used today in decolonial movements to designate the physical mass commonly called America. The name America appears for the first time in 1507 in the planisphere made by German cartographer Waldseemüller to pay homage to the Italian explorer Amerigo Vespucci. According to decolonial theory, in addition to recalling the European imprint on seized land, this term also brings to mind the erasure that preside over the annexation of a land. Indeed, toponymy is rich of the relations between living and non-living, of the relation between humans and the earth, the air, the skies, and those who inhabit them. The name given to a place by its indigenous inhabitants said something about myth and origins, the relationship to ancestors, bodies of water, and vegetations. The colonial flag planted on the seized land acted like a pencil, whose eraser obliterated these networks, while it tipped, rewrote, history, making the place visible to the civilized world. We had a conversation, a group conversation on, and I had asked the lady, what is their place of origin? And it was a very, very hard question for people to answer. To this day, I'm not even sure that I know how to answer. This is what they said. So, restorative circle at the Atelier Médicis. The topic of the day is, what is your terre d'origine? It's like Heimat in German. I don't know how to translate it. Homeland? No, I don't know. A. My mother's family is from Ndarguetch, a fishing village off the coast of the Senegal River. In Wolof, Ndarguetch means the land inside the sea. The Fulani herdsmen who brought the animals on the river called the village Nderguetch, look at the sea. It was also to show the line where the waters meet, the line where the ocean meets the river. Ndarguetch is Mam Kumba Bang's bed. She's the goddess of the river. People went on its bank to ask for her for various favors, a child, success in school, etc. They give her chicken, fruits, meat, and milk. But the city folks, they call Ndar Saint-Louis. It's the name of the king of France. And Elle asked, so you no longer feed the water deity? You give all these good things to the king of France? He is eating pretty good. We all laugh. And Anne, one of the participants of the residency, said, Mom, you ask about our homelands. And the girls answer with water. One of the residents said, yes, but we were born on water and we had to cross the waters to come here. A, as far as I'm concerned, my feet are still wet. There is a serious leak in my house and it's been raining in my living room since yesterday. We all laugh. In the tram on my way home, I think about this sentence. So you no longer feed the water deity. Yup. When a land loses its name, what happens to the spirits and the deity that nested there? So towards the end of the residence, some of the pieces were co-made. Following Nael's death, we spent some nights together in the atelier. We didn't want to be alone. Some of the residents brought their young kids. We slept there. Co-making, and there were lots of conversation. And one of the conversation, this is where where we had this conversation and thinking about if our places, Haiti become Saint-Domingue, Ndar becomes Saint-Louis, can we rename Clichy-sous-Bois, right? We are the indigenous residents. This place was built for us. We were the first one. Can we? And that was funny. So there is a whole part where we play on renaming, and we came up with things like Clichy sous Baobab and things like that. And that was also very a very interesting part. So from Alexis and Marvelous visit, we shared, Torquoise Dysons visited. I had many friends came to see us. We engaged with Belie's work, Indigo Entanglements. Took a turn, travel around the diaspora, engage with Khalida Rawls' work, Alexis Peskins, who will come to see us in November in class. And really something happened, especially after Marvilla's visit. So Alexis is a Franco-Brazilian Russian artist talking about mix. Visual artist, absolutely incredible. And Marvilla is from Bahia, photographer. And her work, she works on deity. She presented a series called Cainda. And the Cainda are a legend from Bahia, where upon realizing that they were taken from Africa and will never come back, some enslaved decided to jump the ship. But instead of sinking and dying at the bottom of the ocean, they recreated a civilization. And at one point, they decided to come out of the ocean and went to establish Bahia. So this idea is, this connection not a disconnection, but a living, thriving connection, the power of the will. You come out of you went into the ocean not as a, an end, a death, but the ocean is a place of continuity. It's the place of salvation. It's the place, where death and where life can restart. Incredible piece. And something happened after marvelous visit. One of our residents during the circle said this. Oh, just 1 second. Yes. Moi, je ne peux pas renaître ici. Je ne suis pas morte là-bas, comme mon ami, de même né. I can't be reborn here. I didn't die there, like my friend of the same nose. By reborn here, elle meant the resurrection process central to Serrer dogmas in her native Senegal. A child is always thought to be an ancestor who returns, but to return, one must have transitioned. She said, Je suis ici en France comme un fantôme, comme un fantôme. I'm here in France like a ghost, like a ghost. So at first, Elle and I wove the base that would serve as a canvas for her piece. She chose a white thread that produced a rough sheet reminiscent of a shroud. And she wanted to attach two motifs on it. The first one is a jellyfish made with bits of the shirts she wore during the crossing between the Tarifa and Europe, and materials recovered from the demolition site of her former apartment and her first place in France. Elle saw the jellyfish the day she sailed off, and it is the last living creature that she associates with Africa. For Elle, all the occupants of the boat have died, even the survivors like her, even those like her who made it to Europe. She said to us, no one has entered here with her nose. Elle speaks of her friend of the same nose. And this is a fairly common formula in West Africa, where under the influence of Islam, the noun nafs designates both the soul and the vital breath. In Wolof, the nafs is in the nose, and a soulmate literally translates to a friend of the same nose. So for Elle, the disappearance of her friend, her double, her twin, also took away her vital breath, her life. She said, the jellyfish saw the boats leaving the ports. They saw the sandals fall into the black water. They heard the waves beating against the walls of the pirogue. They saw the bodies falling or being thrown into the water. The jellyfish have collected the last words of the drowned. They saw the photo of a lover pass by, the fallen amulets, a piece of paper bearing the number of a cousin in Italy. The second element of her composition is a mermaid silhouetted against the Chêne Pointu, a decrepit shopping center where Elle goes when she wants, and this is very interesting, she said to tenir ma respiration, so holding my breath and supporting. Elle explains that she thought she could escape the constraint, economic, family responsibility by leaving Senegal for a better life in Europe. In France, she's been struggling, and she still struggles, with incessant waves of trouble, from administrative issues to health, financial, and mental issues. The shopping center, which seems to literally sink into the earth, becomes un ailleurs, an underwater world where she dives like Marvilla Arroyo's creatures and suspends the gravity of everyday life. Elle is the one through which the crossing between these two parts of the residency, the work on sounds and the quotidian, and the omnipresence of water, was authorized. The Atelier Médicis required a very strong anchoring in Clichy-Montfermeil. And in my proposal phase and in the first weeks of the residency, I imagine, of course, a set of work that would be limited to the neighborhood, Clichy-Montfermeil, of the two towns. And of course, I thought of over there, the other places where these people, the people working with me, had life anchors. Pointe-à-Pitre, Dakar, Jacmel, Bakel, Bamako, Adjamé. I expected that the memories of life in France will necessarily go there and vice versa. Of course, the neighborhood is omnipresent in the sounds that we collected: an ice cream truck sirens, the sounds of coins hastily thrown on the counter by impatient children waiting for their treat, the jangling noise of a mother's bracelets, the sea of accents and languages at a children's square, the white noise of a stadium sprinkler, the Sunday market. Clichy and Montfermeil were also present in the earth and clay from the neighboring Bondy forest that was used to dye multiple canvas, in the sand of the Sunday market that adorns another composition. But something that I was not expecting was the hydrographic network which would take shape from and towards Clichy-sous-Bois once we started diving in our atelier's material. So, from Alexis and Marvilla's visits, Eld opened up. She shares the fall into the sea, the breathing cut off by the salt water, the screaming, yelling, and crying that gradually drowned, the resignation in the face of death. In multiple occasions, her story filled the space of our atelier and suspended time in a single collected breath. Inspiration to follow the disappearance in the water, expiration for those who drown, inspiration for those who survive, expiration for those who survive to tell the tale, and another inspiration for those who survive but suspended their own breathing. I can't even be reborn here. I didn't die there. I didn't stay in the water like her, my friend of the same nose. Elle's story held the group together, and in return, the group held her back. The wake work around her and our making of the piece and the three pieces following that became a critical practice of attaching, remembering, anchoring, and reinventing. The final work, we only have 2 pieces left, will be composed of 6 pieces that can be shown together or separately. Echoic is a visual, literally, sound and theoretical mosaic which reflect the contemporary conditions of Black lives marked by constant proximity with death. Yet, the work we created reflects lives that are generous, generative, theoretically generative, generous for theory, but which resist its enclosing, extractivist, and fixing power. Because this theory is not the tool that will transform, sublimate, or fix Black life. It is Black life. Echoic starts from these sites, from conversations, drawings, laughter, crossings, tears, and walks in order to imagine a work that is a nest. Now I prefer this term to that of archive, which for me evokes a tedious work of classification, recording, coding, and fixation. I'm moving further and further away from these cold, dusty terms because I always have colds in archives, and my eyes hurt. I prefer that I prefer the word ni, nesting, which evokes beginnings, security, the cocon. The nest can also be the place of transmission, the place which, beyond death, can be rearranged and welcome new lives. Merci beaucoup.